what do you do? I create joy, laughter, and lifetime memories. And people look at me, what do you do? And I repeat myself, well, how do you do that? And I do that by making games.
Today is a really fun conversation with games company CEO Dane Chapin. He started his business 30 years ago with a branded version of Monopoly for the Atlanta Olympics, and today produces dozens of titles, board games, including the best-selling game right now on Amazon. Today's episode is sponsored by Intuit's QuickBooks Payroll. I use Intuit every year for my taxes with TurboTax, and I'm excited to talk to you about this product for small businesses. So as your team grows, so does your payroll, not just in terms of expenses, but also in terms of the time it takes to manage. When managing payroll becomes a challenge, QuickBooks Payroll gives small businesses like yours an easier way to get it done. Pay your employees, file payroll taxes, and track time and attendance all in one place. Intuitive software and handy automation tools reduce the need for manual data entry, which frees you up to focus on more pressing tasks like running your business. And because of its same-day deposit capabilities, QuickBooks Payroll supports your cash flow by enabling you to hang on to your money longer without delaying your team's paychecks. That's great for employee morale and also your business's financial health. Visit quickbooks.intuit.com/payroll to learn more about how QuickBooks Payroll could make all the difference for your team. Hi, Dane. How are you? Good to see you today.
Great to see you. I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for being on the podcast. You know, you're the CEO of a games company, The Op. And when I knew I was going to interview you, the first question that I had is, what does the CEO of a games company do during the day? I think back to the scene of the iconic movie Big with Tom Hanks, where the CEO is walking through the store. I think it's FEO Schwartz or something like that. And he says that every weekend he comes in and observes how people are playing the games, and that's how he kind of gets his juice for his job. So what do you do?
I create joy, laughter, and lifetime memories is what I do, really. I'll meet somebody new and you get in a conversation, oh, where are you from? Oh, what do you do? I create joy, laughter, and lifetime memories. And people look at me, what do you do? And I repeat myself, well, how do you do that? And I do that by making games. And think about it. My childhood, probably my most vivid, best, most important, savoring memories are times with my grandparents playing games, going to their house for a sleepover. And they loved playing games. Remember playing canasta. And so that's what I get to do. How I do that, that's obviously there's process involved. But it's I got to tell you, it's a lot of fun doing what I do. I love it.
I bet. I have that same memory. My great grandmother, she taught me poker. We played other games, card games, coin games, and you're right. Totally builds memories, and is something you can do across generation with friends, with anyone. I think probably your business was built most or primarily at the beginning with versions of Monopoly games, but maybe tell the listeners what other games your company's created.
Sure. We started this business 30 years ago. It was my two sisters, me, and a secretary, essentially. And we had a license from Hasbro to do 5 city editions. So it was San Diego, New York, Atlanta, Boston, and San Francisco, I think. And we started to get some traction with it. And we started, Hasbro gave us a longer and longer leash. So over time, we rolled into sports and pop culture. Music, all kinds of stuff. And then over time, we started to develop our own games. And now we're a combination. We sort of have 3 hubs here. We have a co-brand hub, which works with other properties and IP, including Hasbro and Monopoly and Clue. And then we've got a hobby area, and we focus on hobby. Most of that stuff's, there's no third-party IP. And then we have our family party games at the Op. And those are, family party games. We actually currently have the number 1 game in the country, which I'm pretty excited to say, called Topple. So,
Topple, yeah, that's across behind your shoulder there. Okay, describe that game.
It is the world's easiest game to learn how to play. All right, there's 20 letters on this disc. I think this one works. Hang on. Is the power? And there's a timer. I'm going to turn it off for a second. So the categories, it could be, we have categories as part of the game. There's a couple hundred that we include from, let's see, what are these categories? Things at a party, song titles, something flat. And so in the game, you start the timer. You've got 10 seconds. So let's say it's boys' names. That's about the easiest. Ernest. And then it goes to the next person around the table. And they'll say Brad and and that stops then it resets the timer. So you got 10 seconds. And then as it winds down to fewer letters, it gets a little harder. Now, boys' names, that's a pretty easy one. We were playing this morning and I said, things in a fire station. And it was a little more complicated, and everybody's like, you're stumped and there's 20 letters. It doesn't include like Z and X and U and Q and a couple other letters. And a pretty magical game. So there you go. You learn how to play in 5 seconds. It's lightly competitive. It can be multi-generational. That's kind of the magic of our games right now. Lightly competitive, multi-generational, and easy to learn how to play.
There are all these mechanisms or mechanics probably with games. That one's interesting because it's got a timer involved. Is that one of the keys to making a game really exciting?
I think creating some urgency and tension. It's just it makes it fun. Just where there's, but it's slightly competitive. So there's tension without, that you can just kind of egg people on or say, God, you idiot, why can't you figure that one out? That's an easy one. And everybody's got their sweet spots with this thing. I was playing the other day with some guys who are golfers, and it's who's going to win the PGA. So you're just going down the list. If you're a golfer, it's kind of easy. Rory, Tiger, Dustin.
Right.
And if you're not a golfer, it's not. So it just this thing can tap into any interest, any hobby, anything.
You're right about the tension. I remember vividly the first time I played Jenga with my kids. They didn't know the game, but it's sort of an intuitive game once they see it. And I could not believe how much of a rush it was from them to see how this game played and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to prevent to have happen. Yeah, it's cool. Totally. I totally agree with your initial statement about creating joy. I want to ask more about Monopoly because it sounds like that's how your business initially maybe took off. What's it in your mind? Was there one that was most creative or your favorite of the branded Monopoly games, or one that really turned the corner for you? I was talking with a colleague of mine earlier. I don't know whether this is true or not, but he told me he thought there was a version of Monopoly for millennials where you couldn't actually buy property. Instead, you rented out yoga studios and stuff.
Yeah, Hasbro actually made that game themselves. So there's, Monopoly's been around since the 30s, and we started with Hasbro in 1994, and then the brand has really spidered out from them. They do slot machines and clothing, and they've really done an amazing job. It's part of it's an American icon. Let's face it. It's just everybody knows. I speak at San Diego State every few months to a group of entrepreneurial kids. And I'll get in there and talk about one of my games and, Telestrations. It's a really popular game, but 3 of 50
love that game.
Kids, it's a great game. And 3 of 50 kids will raise their hand when I ask them, have you played it or have you heard of it? It's a little frustrating, actually, because I feel like it's so ubiquitous. So I got some work to do. And I say, well, who's heard of Monopoly? And they're looking at me, oh, you idiot, everybody's heard of Monopoly. So we've been really able to ride the coattails of Monopoly and really leverage off the affection that everybody's got for Monopoly. And then it's just been been a privilege and a lot of fun, using it as a canvas to marry it with other worlds, whether it's the Beatles or Game of Thrones or the Olympics. We have it's famous internally story about the Olympics, which I'll tell you at some point today. My favorite game ever, for whatever reason, I loved Wizard of Oz as a kid. And we had the chance to do like the 70th anniversary of the Wizard of Oz or 75th anniversary. And we created a Wizard of Oz Monopoly game, 15 years ago or something. And it was just so gratifying. It was just so fun, all this stuff I grew up with. And in those days, there was no such thing as videotape. Once a year, it would play on like NBC, and it would be a huge night at our house with the kid, with my brothers and sisters, and then we got to do a game on it. So I don't know why that game stands out, but I guess they're a little bit like children too. You love them all.
Yeah. So, do you ever have fierce internal debates about what gets the boardwalk spot,
Oh,
or what?
they're fierce. We did a Napa Valley Monopoly game, I don't know, 25 years ago. And it was so funny. Opus One, which is one of the premier vineyards up there and brands, they wanted to be on God, I'm drawing a blank now.
Park Place or
No,
Boardwalk?
they wanted to be on the opposite. They wanted to be on the
Oh,
cheap space, on the purple. And so
oh,
they wanted to have the least expensive place. And it was just sort of a tongue in cheek thing. So it was really kind of funny that that's what they wanted. And so they mixed it up. We did what game did we do? We did Aspen Monopoly one year, and there's two iconic hotels up there, Little Nell and God, why am I drawing a blank on it? I'll think of it. But they were both vying for the boardwalk space. In our mind, it was the Little Nell was an automatic, and the other was a little more historic, the Jerome. And I think the Jerome ended up not going on, and we put their iconic restaurant on it.
oh, okay. That's
It's
funny.
it's tricky. And then
I get it. I get it.
Well, Seattle, we did a Seattle Monopoly game like 27 years ago. Starbucks was on it. And of course, you want to put Microsoft on it, right? They're iconic up there. And that was when they were in the middle of all their antitrust stuff about being a monopoly. And so they opted not to go on the game. So it's
that is hilarious and ironic. That's so funny.
Yeah, isn't that funny? So
you mentioned earlier it was you and your two sisters early on. Take us back to the origin story, because I understand a little bit of background reading is that you sold board games out of your trunk. Is that true? Maybe take us back to the first few months or year of the business.
Well, that ties to the Olympic Monopoly game, and so we got to go from Hasbro to do an Atlanta Olympic Monopoly game, which was the 100th anniversary of the modern Olympics. And it was 1996. And for those of us around, the Olympics that were coming to Atlanta, it was a huge deal. It was,
I remember,
it was just, for some reason, the Olympics, when they're domestic and in your backyard, it's a lot bigger deal when it's on a separate time zone in Australia. You can't watch anything live. And there was just a lot of, just amazing corporate support around it, a lot of buzz around it, a lot of, world famous athletes. Hasbro gave us the go to do an Olympic Monopoly game. And it was really exciting time for us. We were working around the clock because we sort of got the approval late. And we're trying to figure out, and we're an embryonic company, so we're trying to figure out how many games to make, because it's kind of a white hot thing. Then Olympics are over and you're not going to sell too many Olympic games, a month after the Olympics. And we settled on the number of, driven by a PO that was promised to us of 20,000 units for a big customer. 30 days before the Olympics, that customer said, well, we're just going to order 90 games. We're having second thoughts. And we'd already pulled the trigger on production. And they'd never given us a hard PO. They had just given us a promise. And my life flashed in front of me, because literally that would have bankrupted us.
Mm-hmm.
So I was due in Atlanta about a week before the Olympics to do all kinds of press stuff. And they look for all the filler before the games start. And so I was part of the filler with doing a Olympic edition of Monopoly. So, tons of radio shows and Today Show. And I'm walking down the street 3 or 4 days before the Olympics. And I had shipped all the games to Atlanta, figuring that's where our customers would be. And we had orders for about 5,000 games. So I got to figure out how to sell 30,000 games. And if the games are all warehoused in Atlanta, at least we can, turn them around in a day or two. And about 2 days before the Olympics, I'm walking through Olympic Village. I got a game under my arm. Some guy stops me. He says, "What's that? What is that under your arm?" I said, "Well, it's an Olympic edition of Monopoly." The guy said, "That is the coolest thing I've ever seen." And it was really cool. Mm-hmm. It featured all the flags or the banners from the 22 previous modern Olympics. And it was just, it was a perfect marriage or merger between the Olympics and the canvas that we have to work on, Monopoly. And the guy said, "Where can I get it?" And I said, "Well, you can get it at Rich's or there. And I said, "Here, just take my game." He said, "Dude, I'm not going to take your game." I said, "Well, I own the company. I got 30,000 more where this came from. He said, I'm not going to let you give it to me." I said, "You can pay me for it." So I told him $20. It was wholesale price at the time. Gave me a $20 bill. Light bulb went off. I rented I actually got a photo here. I'll pull it up for you. Maybe this will help drive the audience on
the YouTube.
On YouTube. They'll be so curious to see this photo. Hang on, let me pull it up. And so I rented. I bought a dolly, rented a van, and I spent the next 2 weeks. If you can see that.
Oh, there we go. I see that. Nice.
So I made a little sandwich board with the game, and I hired a couple of guys that were like selling water bottles. I said, dude, you want to sell water bottles or Monopoly games? And so I had a couple of helpers. We sold 20,000 games on the streets of Atlanta in the next 2 weeks. So
Wow.
it was kind of an inflection point moment for us as a company. If I didn't do that, I'm not sure what the heck we'd have done. It would have put an enormous amount of stress on us financially because of the investment we made in all that inventory.
It's a really cool story. One of hustle. I love it. So you think about that maybe as a stage of your business, and now you're 30 years in, 32 years in, something like that. And do you think of your business over that time in terms of a set of stages? Like I think as people people might think, how do I get to $1 million in revenue? How do I get to 10 million? How do I get to 100 million? That's one way of looking at things. Is there a way that you think about the evolution of your business?
Yeah, I mean, I reflect back on my career with USAopoly. So I started, I was 35. It's 30 years later. I'm 65 now. I stepped away like 12 years ago to start some other businesses, and I came back in 2.5 years ago to run it again. And I think I should have taken more risk. Now, we certainly took risk, but I don't think I was. I reflect back at opportunities to be more audacious. And we've been successful as a company. We're mid-sized company. We have 80 employees. Got a couple of peers in the business that started when I did. Now they've got billion-dollar toy companies. And I don't think they're any smarter or more creative than I am. Great guys, but I think they had a vision to be, they were really driven by growing to a certain number. And I really just, I don't know, I didn't think of the business that way before. And now I'm sort of putting, stakes in the ground about hitting a certain number. And it's not necessarily just to hit that number, but it forces you into a process to say, okay, if we're going to grow the business by 50% over the next 3 years, what are the pieces and parts that we need to put together to get there? And so I think, I think it's akin to running a marathon. Let's suppose you run a marathon, you had a 4-hour time, and you want to get to 3 hours, and you go to a coach, and he assesses your natural ability and how fast you are and this and that, and you put together a program. It might be a year program where you start training once a week, and you break it down, and okay, my daily training. So you hit these hurdles every day. And, if you do all the training and the process, the race takes care of itself. So that's how I'm thinking about it. And then that's the reward to say, you look back and reflect, gosh, I put in all this work. I had laid out the groundwork. I kept on it. And, you wake up one day and you have all this growth, or you hit your 3-hour marathon time, whatever it might be.
Well, that's an really interesting lens you put on it, which I interpreted it as how far ahead are you looking at things? And when you talked about the story about the Olympics, it feels to me that you're very, very focused on this place and time and tomorrow and next week. And how do we cover the fact that we've purchased, pre-produced all these games? At what stage do you feel like you could think a little bit further ahead? Was it right away, or only after the business had become established?
That's kind of more of a life question than a business question.
Yeah, probably.
I was a competitive tennis player in college, or through college, and I was myopically obsessed with playing pro tennis. And I played at UCLA, one of the leading schools in the country. And a lot of those kids that go through that school, playing on the tennis team, go to the pros. And my grades suffered for it. And I was, like 6 or 7 on the tennis team. I wasn't one of the top players, but I felt like I was a better athlete. And I didn't start playing tennis till late, at 14, which is late relative to getting to that level. But I was worked my ass off and, got better and better. And then Jimmy Connors, who was who had gone to UCLA, famous tennis player, he's now 70, but a lot of people don't remember who he was, but he was like a Roger Federer and Nadal of his time and number one in the world. And he had gone to UCLA his freshman year. He was 6 or 7 years older than me, and he was my king god hero. I loved the guy. And he showed up at our practice one day, and he was on the court next to me. So coach assigned, okay, Jimmy, you're against Fritz. Dane, you're on court 2. And all of a sudden, I'm adjacent to the number one tennis player in the world and my hero, who I'd never seen live before. So I'm beside myself. And Fritz is getting ready to serve. And I'm just, I'm ignoring what I'm supposed to be doing, playing on my own court, and I'm
Of
watching Jimmy.
course.
And so Jimmy's standing on the baseline, getting ready to return Fritz's serve, and Fritz had a huge serve, and I would stand about 10 feet behind the baseline. And Jimmy hit the serve, the return serve, like it was an offensive shot. And one shot, and it shattered my dream. I knew instantly I would never catch up with that. It was just too big. I would catch up with the guys on my team, and I kind of knew if I could catch up to those guys, it gives me a pathway to the pros. And it was my heart and head synced up finally, because my head wouldn't, my heart wanted to do it. My head was a little smarter, but my heart overpowered my common sense until I saw Jimmy hit that one shot. And I started getting better grades, and I discovered that there was going to be life after tennis. And it's been a hell of a fun ride.
Yeah, no matter what sport you're into, there's always a time when you realize I'm not going to be Wayne Gretzky, like in my case, or Jimmy Connors or anything like that. And yours happened. Yours happened live in front of you. That's a funny story. I wanted to talk about the kind of entrepreneurship in general, because I know that we've talked a lot about games so far, but you've focused on ventures like water bottles, beer, real estate. So not just one type of thing, lots of things. What do you think it is about you that makes you want to constantly invent and build?
I just don't want anybody telling me what time I have to be back from lunch. That was sort of the start of it. I was pretty entrepreneurial as a kid. I was always driven to make money. I was giving tennis lessons in college on the weekends, and I was making $30 an hour, 45 years ago, when kids were working food service for $3 or $4 an hour. So I could go, give, instead of sleeping off a hangover on a Saturday morning, like a lot of my college peers, I was pretty disciplined and go give tennis lessons. So I always had money in my pocket, and I liked it, and created a lot of independence too. And then my first job out of college, or one of my first jobs out of college, I was working in the mailroom at one of the film studios. I decided I wanted to be a movie producer, and I had given tennis lessons to a bunch of, Hollywood people. So a guy who ran the studio, you can start in the mailroom. I hated it. I lasted, I can't imagine I lasted a year. I think I almost got fired about 10 times. And the one thing I hated a ton was just, you got 30 minutes for lunch or whatever the number was. And if you're not back, you get in trouble.
Oh, right.
I just was like, this is not for me.
So, okay. So an unexpected answer to the question, but it makes sense. You wanted to be totally in control of your own destiny. And, I want to go back to something you said earlier, because you said you're at San Diego State, or you talk there sometimes. You talk with a lot of students. And then let's say that some of those students, or one of those students, they have kind of the hustle and desire and inventiveness that maybe you were talking about before. They really want money in their pocket, or they don't want to be told what to do by a boss. What are some of the things that you see in those folks that might still potentially hold this person back? Because I'm thinking about entrepreneurs that are listening to this and want some sort of like secret nugget or words of wisdom about obstacles to break through.
I'll tell you, I think one of the most important things you need as an entrepreneur are people in your life that'll tell you what you don't want to hear. Because it's happened to me where I've gotten myopically focused, and I had a couple of the businesses I started when I was had my time away from USAopoly. I was really maniacally focused, and I just wasn't hearing, some constructive criticism from people. And then people got to the point they didn't want to tell me what I didn't want to hear, because I wasn't going to listen to them. So I think it's really important. I don't care how good the idea is. You want to, it's like our games. We've got games, and I tell people here all the time, some of the new games, I said, we need to get out of our echo chamber and take these games and not bring people into the office and play games and watch them play games. We need to get these games out in people's living rooms and in restaurants or places where people play games, and watch dispassionately, if this game works or not. And it's just interesting, the clues. You just got to really expose yourself to, what may work and what doesn't work, and what may work great in a laboratory may not work really well in real life. So I just think you've got to. My skin has gotten a lot more scarred over the years. I'm kind of indifferent to criticism now. I want it. I want to get outside my comfort zone. So I think there's a few key nuggets there. Getting my daughter. She went to graduate school, which she finished about 3 years ago. She's an artist. And she had a couple of different options. And I said, why are you choosing UCSD? She said, I think it's the one school that's going to push me outside my comfort zone more than the others. And I was actually a little surprised with her answer because her personality is wanting to, stay inside a comfort zone, and, for various reasons. And boy, she has blossomed since then. And the stuff she's doing as an artist, I think, is directly attributable to getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And exposing yourself as an artist, when your stuff doesn't sell, you take it pretty personally. So it's hard.
It is true. I think about the teams that I'm on, or been a part of, or have led. When there's healthy disagreement, healthy tension, a lot of pushing back, doesn't make every meeting that easy, but you can come to a better decision. You can get a lot more things done. You have a lot more opinions at the table. I think that's true for all kinds of business. I wanted to ask. Go ahead.
I have one. You brought up one further thought. My wonderful father, my best friend in life, who I lost him about 10 years ago, but he used to like to write letters to the editor, and he'd get stuff published. And it inspired me. And I had a piece that I wrote that actually was too long to be a letter to the editor. And this is like 15 years ago. And I submitted it to the San Diego Business Transcript, and it got published. And so it kind of created a hobby of mine, which is writing political commentary. And so my number one critic, my father, I've had a bunch of stuff published over the years, and he'd be the first guy I'd send a piece to. And about every fifth piece, he'd call me, and he said, in this low voice, he said, I wouldn't change a word. and then I'd send a piece. I'd be all proud. Oh, my God, I can't wait. And this was like more rewarding than Little League. Coming to my game and me hitting a home run or something. Mm-hmm. At 50 years old, my old man telling me I wouldn't change a word, and I'd feel like a kid. And then I'd send him a piece, email him or fax him a piece that I just thought, well, I nailed it. He'd call me back. He'd just rip into me. I was like, what? Oh, my God. Not what I was expecting. So I, put my tail between my legs. I go back to, my word processor and rewrite it. And, about half the time after I rewrote those, I'd get I wouldn't change a word. And, and I recognize, as much as I hated it, I recognized he was always right. And whenever he had, sharp words for my piece, he was just trying to make it better. And I exposed myself to him, and he made me a better writer for it, that's for sure.
Well, and it sounded like he wanted you to be successful. So even though he disagreed, he was in your corner. And I think that's one of the most important parts about surrounding yourself with the people that you were talking about. Dan, I want to ask, you started a lot of businesses. There's so many ways that make starting a business easier now. If you think about the digital tools, et cetera, would you say it's easier or harder to start a business now than 20 to 30 years ago? When you just think about everything that goes into it.
I don't necessarily think it's, and I've been starting businesses for almost 40 years. I don't think it's harder or easier. I think it's always hard. I do think there's more opportunity in the history of the world today than there's ever been. If you're a music band, 30 years ago, you got no future unless you can get some guy who subjectively decides that you're going to be the next it band. And now you've got an opportunity. The world is your audience, and you have access to it now. And let's suppose you have a song and you put it out on YouTube. One person might watch it. Maybe that person likes it. He sends it to 4 people. Our game Topple is a perfect example of this. We launched this game 6 years ago. It kind of meandered along 20,000, 25,000 units a year. And then we changed the packaging. We sort of recognized it was too kid-esque. It was too junior. And it wasn't necessarily an adult game, but it was a game for not just kids. We changed the packaging, and then we sold 40,000 games. And then two years ago or something, 2 videos were user-generated posts that went viral, sold millions of people watched this stuff. No doing of our own, which is something I can talk about in a minute. And Amazon went from selling 100 games a day to 1,000 games a day overnight. And we were like, oh, my God. And it's a great game, but this thing accelerated acceptance of it because of the ability, for something to go viral. Don't ask me, it's still a magic. What goes viral and what doesn't, I'll never be able to explain. But we took advantage of it. We sort of put gas on the fire, and we sold over 1 million of these last year.
Wow. Congratulations on that.
It's the number one selling game on Amazon.
That's awesome. Dane, any final thoughts for the audience?
Well, as you say, I tell you, it's being an entrepreneur my whole life. I wouldn't change. It's had its moments and its ups and downs and days that I'd have to figure out how to make payroll. There's nothing more stressful, but there's also nothing more rewarding. And, not everybody's got the constitution for it or the patience for it. My wife has a Fortune 500 background, and I met her 20-something years ago, so a little later in life, and brought her into a family business that we have. And it was really uncomfortable for her at first, where's, somebody where the paycheck comes down automatically and my expense account's taken care of. So it takes a different constitution to stick with it, and the patience and the ups and downs. And, but, being your own boss, and when it, and you can certainly make a lot of money, and not every entrepreneur does, but, when it works, it's really rewarding. And the psychic rewards are far greater than any financial rewards.
Dane, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Did you know that more than 20 million professionals and business owners visit business.com and Business News Daily? Why? It's the best place for resources, advice, and information about how to grow your business. And if your goal is to reach our audience, you should become one of our lead partners, sponsor a section of the site, or sponsor even this podcast. Reach us at business.com/connect. That's business.com/connect.